Welcome to our class. Today we'll discuss a concept on production theory, the essentials of production theory. So when we're discussing this issue in production theory, we're going to look at aspects of the inputs that are involved in production. Now, if I may ask, what is production in your own words? What is production? How do you understand production? Okay, so production is simply a process of creating goods and services. It involves the use of various inputs, such as labor, capital, and raw materials. So production and cost are the two concepts that we use in the field of economics to understand the essence of business and decision-making. So I'll explain these aspects one by one. We have a cost element, which is very important. So when you're discussing cost, we're basically talking about what we incur in the process of producing the goods and services. So there are two types of costs. They're what we call the fixed costs and the variable costs. The fixed costs are simply costs that do not change with the level of production. Examples include rent, property taxes, insurance. Variable costs, which are costs that change with the level of production, such as material cost, labor, as well as energy. We also have a relationship that exists between output and inputs. This relationship can be illustrated by what we call an isoquant, which joins points that offer the same outputs. Isoquant 1, isoquant 2, and isoquant 3. These are called isoquants. Then we also have similar graphs, which are called isocosts. The points isocost 1, isocost 2, isocost 3. So the cost of production is simply calculated using what we call the total cost function. The total cost function is simply given by the total fixed cost plus the total variable cost. That is how we compute our cost function. Are we moving together? So the TC stands for total cost, FC stands for fixed cost, and VC stands for the variable cost. The average cost and the marginal cost can also be calculated using the same total cost function. So when we divide the total cost by quantity, we create the average total cost or the average cost. When we divide our fixed cost by quantity, we call this our average fixed cost. When we divide our variable cost by quantity, we call that the average variable cost. Anything divided by quantity is called average. Okay. So we also have the following. Marginal cost is simply the additional cost of producing one unit. Marginal cost is change in total cost over change in quantity. marginal cost is given by the TC over the Q. That is how we find our marginal cost. So in a nutshell, what we can say is understanding essentials of production and costs is very important for every business. Why? To make informed decisions. How? By allocating appropriate resources. So the production process will include provision of goods and services using various combinations. Whilst cost simply refers to expenses that are incurred in the production process. So the production process is denoted by the letter Q. So Q is given in terms of what? A function of labor and capital. So if we differentiate the Q over the L, we call this the marginal product of labor. If we multiply the marginal product of labor times the price, we get what we call the marginal revenue product of labor. If we differentiate our quantity with respect to capital, we call that the marginal product of capital. So the reward for capital is called rent. The reward for labor is called what? To start with, K stands for capital. So its reward is called rent. L stands for labor. Its reward is called a wage. So this also has a Lagrangian multiplier, a point at which we maximize what? Production, where the marginal product of capital over its rent should be equal to the marginal product of what? Labor over its wage. Let's do a quick, can you remember? The curves that join points that offer the same production are called what? What are these curves that join points that offer the same output?
Isoquants.
They're called isoquants, correct. So these isoquants, just like we have the principle in indifference curves, isoquant 1 is lower than isoquant 2, which is lower than isoquant 3. But we are constrained in production, so the point at which the isoquant kisses budget line, or the cost, the isocost, the cost equation, is called the marginal rate of technical substitution, MRTS. So this point looks at the point where we maximize our production at the optimum wage and rent. So this point really occurs when the marginal product of labor over its wage should be equal to the marginal product of capital over its rent. And so the Lagrangian function, in this case, in terms of labor and capital, will be given as follows: the RK as WL. The cost function is given by RK as WL. The cost, rent for capital plus wage for labor. Production has a law that governs it. So we've already established that our Q stands for the total product. So in terms of labor, if we divide our Q by L, simply the total product divided by the labor units, we call that average product of labor. If we divide or find the change in total product of labor over the change in the labor units, we call that the what? Marginal product of labor. If we multiply the marginal revenue times the marginal product of labor, what we get is called the marginal revenue product. So we have a law in economics, which we call the law of diminishing returns, which is also called the law of diminishing marginal returns. It's an economic concept which simply states that as more units of the variable input, such as labor or capital, are being added to a fixed input, such as land or machinery, that additional output will be produced by an additional unit of the variable input will eventually start to decline. So if you have a piece of land and you're employing labor units, at some point, you need to know that the output that each individual will be producing proportional to the land that you have will be diminishing until a point where it starts declining. Why? Because people will either start playing or people will be leaving work for others. So it becomes a problem if you're in human resource and you're overemployed. So literally, we just mean that as more units of a variable input are added to a fixed input, the total output will do what? Will increase quite all right. But the additional units will reduce for every additional input that you're going to put. So this is what we call the law of diminishing returns. For instance, if we have an input like land or machinery, it has limited capacity to produce. So adding more units of a variable input will eventually lead to inefficiencies, which we call diminishing returns. So for example, let's say a farmer has a fixed land and has more laborers to cultivate the land. Initially, the additional output from each farmer will increase the yield of crops, but eventually adding more workers will overcrowd, bring in efficiencies and will cause the yield to decrease at some point. So this is where the law is important. So you need to know when to stop employing. So policymakers use this for policy making to considering decisions on how to allocate resources. They actually suggest that there is an optimal level of input that must be employed to maximize output. Beyond that level, adding more units will be unproductive. We have an example, for instance, company ABC has what? Has 10 laborers. The average product of labor, let's say, is 1,000. Then the price for each laborer, 2 units. And we're also told that we want to employ a new laborer, 1 new laborer. Now, when this new laborer comes in, he's bringing additional units of 900 units. Part A, find the new marginal product. After we employ this person. Part B, if we are paying, if he's asking us to pay him 2,000 kwacha, is it worth paying that amount? Is he economical? We want to calculate using production theory. So number 1, what have we been given? The number of laborers. Laborers is 10. Okay. What are we given the price? It's 2. The average product of labor is 1,000. So we know that average product of labor is simply total product of labor divided by the number of laborers. So we have 1,000 here, which is against how many laborers? 10 laborers. So to find the total product that these laborers are producing, so the total product for the 11 laborers is what? 10 times 1,000. So these 10 laborers, each one is producing 1,000. So all the 10 are producing 10,000 together. Now, one additional laborer, 10 plus 1, will be 11 now. When we add what he's bringing into the company, we call it the marginal product of labor. Anything additional is called marginal product. So this laborer who wants to join us is saying, me, when I join you, I'm going to add 900 units to your production. So what is our new total product of labor? It is 10,900. Now, question number 1, get the new average product for the 10 laborers when we employ this new person. So we know average product of labor is simply total product of labor over the number of laborers. So these 11 laborers, now they're 11. What is their total production? 10,900. And how many laborers do we have? They're not 10 now, but they're 11. So we need to now calculate the new average. So the new average, we're going to have what? 10,900 divided by 11. So we're going to get 990.91. So this is what we call new average for the 11 laborers. Then part B, if we're paying him 2,000 per is it economical? So our decision rule is always that our marginal revenue product of labor must be greater than the wage, or must be greater than the marginal resource cost. So this person is asking for 2,000. So how much is our marginal resource? How much is it worth? So we know that marginal revenue product is simply the additional units that is having, which is the marginal product of labor, times the price that is bringing in. So this person is bringing in 900 units, and each unit is 2 kwacha. So when we apply 2 kwacha, the worth of how much is bringing is 1,800. So we can only employ if the contribution that is bringing is more than the wage. So here, clearly, this is less than the wage, so he's uneconomical. So he's not a viable entity. So we do not employ. Are we following?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So we can try to go to our pamphlet, Managerial Economics. Pamphlet. Where is it? Managerial Economics pamphlet. Right. Those who got this copy, let's go to question number . Production. The one we're answering is this one here, ABC. So the way that it will come is like this. Okay. So we're told that ABC is operating with an average product of 1,000. So our average product of labor is 1,000. With this current 10 workers. So labor is what? 10. Total product of labor, the 10 is simply the labor units times the average. So 10 times 1,000. So these 10 laborers produce a total of 10,000. Then we are told that we are considering an additional worker who will only produce 900 units. So marginal product, additional means MP. So that's the marginal product of labor is 900. What will be the company's average when this worker is taken on? So we're asked to calculate the average product of labor for 11 people. So this is 10,000 over 11, which we already calculated is 990.91. Then here, assuming the price is 2 kwacha per unit, should the worker be taken on if the wage is 1,700? We want to calculate the marginal product of labor. How much are these units worth?
Collins, just there. Yeah, so when we say average product of labor, we are saying 10,000 divided by 11, which we are getting 990.1. So my question is this: when you look at total product of labor, why aren't we doing 11 times 1,000? Why are we doing 10 times 1,000?
No, it's actually 10,900 here, not 10,000, because this is for 11 people. This was for 10 people. Okay? So when we add as this additional worker, the total product of labor is what? 10,900 divided by 11. That's the one who give us this. Thank you for that. This was for 10 people, but now it's 11 people. So we use 10,900 over 11. I think that's what I just apportioned it. Is that clear? So let me make it more practical. So we're 11 of us here. Suppose you were 10 of you. Each one of you is contributing 10,000 kwacha. What is the total that each one of you produce the 10 of you? It's 10,000 kwacha times 10, which is 10,000 kwacha. Then I want to join your company. And I say, for me, I'll be bringing just alone a 10,000 kwacha. So my 10,000 kwacha plus the 10,000 kwacha, we're going to have total for the 11 of us, which is 20,000 kwacha. But the average is 20,000 divided by 11, not 10, because I've now joined you. So if I'm productive, these guys were producing 10,000 together. This guy who joined them has 900. So together they have 10,900. So we divide them by 11. Now, he's asking to be paid 1,700. Is he worth being paid? So we now have to calculate, well, how much is he bringing? 900. How much is the market price? 200. How much is the value of what he's bringing? 1,800. And how much is he asking to be paid? Only 1,700. Should we employ him? Yes, because he's bringing more than the wage. So he's employable. That clear? Are we together? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes.
All right, let's look at the reverse and try to brainstorm with me. So we're told in an opposite scenario, somebody was fired. So here's the storyline. So I told a Chinese company is operating at an average of 1,000 with its current 10 workers. It's considering firing one worker whose marginal product is 1,300. What is the new average when the person is fired? Who wants to try? Who wants to try?
Let me try. Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay. Since we have got the company is operating at the average product of 1,000 with 10 workers. Now it's considering firing an employee who's bringing in 1,300 units. So when we are going to less 1,000, 1,300 from 10 from 1,000, is it?
Yes.
No.
Right. So average product of labor of what? Total product of labor over labor units. So the total product of labor is what? 10 times
1,000.
And the labor unit, the laborers are how many? They are 10.
10.
So this is 10,000 divided by 10, which goes back to 1,000. But in this case, we're firing. So the person we're firing was initially 1,300. That's one person. So here we're also going to subtract it by 1 minus 1 laborer. So this is 8,700 over what? 9. So 87 divided by 9. So we have 966. The new average for 9 laborers. Okay. Now, assuming this worker we are being considered to be fired was bringing in 3,000, and its marginal units were 1,400, and the price was what? 2 quarter per unit. So we know that the marginal revenue product must be greater than the wage. The marginal product revenue is supposed to be the marginal product of labor times the price. The additional units is what? 1,400. And the price of this one is what? 2. So in total, he was bringing 2,800. And how much were we paying him? 3,000. Was he worth keeping? No, because what he was bringing in was 2,800, and how much we're paying him was 3,000. So he was what? Uneconomical. So he was worth firing. Okay. So now I also need you to learn how to come up with what we call the tables. So suppose we're given labor units 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're also given our Q, which is 10, 18, 40, and here we have 45. So we can complete this table How do we find the total product of labor? Just simply, how do we find the average product of labor? Sorry. Because Q is the same as total product of labor. Average product of labor.
Isn't it Q over L?
Yes, Q over L. So here we're going to have what? 5.
That is 5, 6, 10, and 9.
Right? Then how do we find the marginal product of labor? Changing total product of labor over changing what? Labor units. So the first one is the dash 18 minus then here to be what? 7. So 18 minus 10 is 8 divided by 1 put 8. Then 40 minus 18.
That should be 12.
No, 22.
Oh, sorry, 22.
It's 22. And here 45 minus what? 40. What do we get?
45 minus 40 is 5.
5, yes. Then here 5 minus 4 is 1. The difference is 5.
5.
And here
that is 4, which is 4. Huh?
This is 4 divided by what?
By 1, by 2, I mean.
Which is what?
Which is 2.
Which is 2. All right. Then suppose we're given a price.
Mr. Collins.
10 kwacha. Yes, please.
Hello, Mr. Collins.
Uh-huh.
You are speaking Greek now. I can't get what you are doing there.
Okay. This is where it becomes interesting. The Greek must be felt. Yes. So this is where we're fulfilling the formulas I was giving you. This is the same as total product of labor. When we divide the total product of labor over the labor units, we call it average product of labor. So this one divided by that, 5. 18 divided by 3, 6. 40 divided by 4, 10. 45 divided by 5, 9. 49 divided by 7, 7. Are we together on this one?
Yes, we are.
Then the marginal product of labor, I said it is the change in total product of labor over change in labor units. So the first one doesn't have a pair on top, so we start from here. Total product is here. 18 minus what? 18 minus 10 divided by 3 minus 2.
1.
8 over 1, which is what? 8. Then again get 40 minus 18 is 22. Divided by 4 minus 3 is 1, that is 22. Then here 45 minus 40, which is 5, divided by 5 minus 4, which is 1, so it's still 5. 49 minus 45 is 4. 7 minus 5 is 2. So 2 into 4 is 2. Are we together?
Yes.
Come again, sir.
The change.
Yes.
49 minus 45 divided by 7 minus what? 5. So here will be 4, here will be 2. So when you divide that, you get 2. That is where the 2 is coming from, here. Okay. Then you've been given the price, it's 10 kwacha, you put 10 kwacha throughout. And what is the marginal revenue product? So you multiply. Marginal revenue product is simply the marginal product of labor times the price itself. So multiply these two. 80, 8 times 10, 8, and 2 times 10 is 220. 5 times 10 is 50. 2 times 10 is 20. And maybe they give you the cost. Cost, maybe they say the cost is 50 part of the route. So how many units do we have for us to maximize production? The marginal revenue must be equal to the marginal cost. So you go where they're equal. So how many labor hours are going to be optimal? 5 labor hours are going to be optimal.
Come again concerning the 50s and the 5.
You have been given already that the cost is what? 50. So just fit 50 throughout. So we know that to maximize production, marginal revenue product must be equal to marginal resource cost. So just look at where they're equal to. 50 and 50 are equal to. So how many laborers do we employ? 5 laborers. An exam setup, it can come like this. So we're told that the units of labor, the marginal product, the marginal revenue, and the marginal resource cost is as follows. So here, what is the profit maximizing level of output? So we know that the marginal product of labor times the price, which is the marginal revenue. You multiply them. So we can create another column here, which we call the marginal revenue product. So this by that is 40. This by that is 30. This by that is 20. This by that is 10. This by that is 0. So now we look at where they're the same, 20 against 20. So to be optimal, we want to employ 3.5 labor units. 3.5 labor units. So the theory of production, I've discussed the aspects of the input, the law of diminishing returns. I've explained how to come up with the table. Now, the law of diminishing returns simply asserts that as you're increasing in production, the graph will fall up to some point if you overemploy. So there's a peak where you're going to stop employing. So we have the relationship that exists. We call them 3 stages of production: the stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Stage 1 here, our marginal product of labor is positive, right? And our total product of labor is increasing. In stage 2, the total product of labor reaches its maximum, its peak. And in stage 2, that is where our marginal product of labor is 0. When we go to stage 3, that is where the marginal product of labor becomes negative. So these are 3 stages. Let me ask you to explain the 3 stages of production using graphs. Explain the 3 stages of production. So that is how you explain it, using what? The marginal product, average product, and what? Total product of labor. So let me explain them again. For these stages, you need to understand them very well. This is where the law of diminishing returns is manifested. So if you don't understand what is happening in the 3 stages, then you may be left behind. So the 3 stages of production are simply a framework used to describe the relationship that exists between the inputs resulting in the output levels. So these 3 stages are referred to the increasing returns, the diminishing returns, and the negative return stage. So in the increasing return stage, this is the first stage. In this stage, what you're going to identify is the marginal product of labor, which will be increasing. Average product of labor is also increasing. the total product of labor is increasing. So this is a stage which occurs when there's abundance of what? Fixed inputs such as land or machinery or additional units of the value. All the three are increasing. And there's a second stage that we have. The second stage, the stage in which the following is happening. So we call it the diminishing return stage. So the addition of 1 unit in input, number 1, will lead to an increase in total output quite right, but at a decreasing rate. In this stage, what will happen? The marginal product begins decreasing, while the average product is still increasing, but it's reaching its peak. The total product is increasing, but at a decreasing rate. This is a stage where there is limited amount of fixed assets, and adding 1 more unit of variable cost will result into the inefficiencies I talked about. And finally, we go to the last stage. We go to the last stage where things are declining. So, which we call the what? We call that the negative return stage. In this stage, adding 1 more unit will decrease our total output. So during this stage, both the marginal product of labor and average product of labor are decreasing. And the total product is also decreasing in this stage. So when adding an additional unit of a variable input, it leads to what we call overcrowding. So this results in outputs to decrease. So to summarize the 3 stages of production, is simply a framework that we use to epitomize the relationship that exists between the inputs and the outputs. During the increasing stage, both the marginal and average product of labor are increasing. Even the total product is increasing, as we saw in the graphs. So everything is increasing. But in the second stage, when you add 1 additional unit, these 2 guys are now declining. This guy is still increasing. So in the second stage, which for the decreasing stage, the marginal product of labor is decreasing. The average product of labor is increasing. The total product is increasing at a decreasing rate. When we go to the decreasing or negative stage, for both the marginal product of labor and average product of labor decreasing, the total product is also decreasing. So all the 3 in this stage, as you can see, are falling down. So the marginal product particularly is in the negative. So these are the 3 stages of production. So we call them the returns to scale. Now, returns to scale is simply defined as a percentage change in the total output when the inputs are increased or reduced by the same percentage. So when you're dealing with returns to scale, we have what we call the constant returns to scale. So if you have the units of labor and capital, alpha and beta, when we add these alpha and beta, it is equal to 1. For instance, we have 0.3 and here we have 0.7. So 0.3 plus 0.7, adding up to 1. Constant returns to scale. Increasing returns to scale, our alpha plus beta is greater than 1. For instance, if here we have 0.5 and here we have 0.7. When we add these 2, 0.5 plus 0.7, we get 1.2. Then we have the decreasing returns to scale, where our alpha plus our beta is less than 1. In an example where we have L is 0.5, here maybe 0.4. So we total the powers there, 0.5 plus 0.4, get 0.9, it's less than 1. So this typifies what we call the decreasing returns to scale. We've also mentioned a key concept of isoquants, which is simply a graph that shows combination of 2 inputs which offer the same level of output. So isoquants are similar to indifference curves in that they have a negative slope, and isoquant above the other has more output. They don't crisscross, they don't touch the axis, they are convex, not concave, convex about the origin. And we also talked about the optimal point, which is called the marginal rate of techno substitution, which is simply the quantity of one input that the producer can sacrifice in order to get an extra input of the other whilst remaining at the same level. So marginal rate of techno substitution has a falling tendency due to the law of diminishing marginal productivity. So it is at optimal point. Then we have a concept which we call economies of scale. Economies of scale are benefits which a company enjoys as it expands. These ones may be internal economies of scale resulting from growth, or external economies of scale resulting from the growth of the industry. For instance, companies like Zambia Sugar at some point had enjoyed what we call economies of scale, where they were able to dominate the market such that they had what we call byproducts. So in an event where a competitor wanted to join, they would simply reduce their prices of sugar to the lowest possible because they had other bulk raw materials or products, byproducts like molasses. Such that even if they were able to sell sugar at 1 kwacha, they still have economies of scale to sell other products that will complement. So I repeat, economies of scale is a concept in economics that we use when where the cost per unit of output decreases as the scale of production increases. In other words, when a firm produces goods or services on a large scale, it has advantage of economies of scale and can reduce its costs per unit, which leads to increased efficiency and productivity. So economies of scale can arise from various factors such as specialization, investment in technology, infrastructure, bulk purchases of raw materials, and marketing and distribution costs that spread over volumes. So as a result, firms which achieve economies of scale will often produce goods at a very lower level than their competitors. That is the reason why our Zambian market has suffered the markets of the Chinese, because they have economies of scale. So internal economies of scale will be characterized by the following. We have purchasing economics, where they are able to purchase in bulk and earn discounts from firms. Marketing economics, where they are able to buy large firms will be able to market their products effectively and efficiently. Financial economics, where large firms will be able to raise huge sums of money at a very low interest rate. And managerial economics, where large firms are able to employ skilled labor that will hype their earnings. We also have what is called economies of scale. Yes, please.
Sorry to take you back on the internal economies of scale. When you say marketing economies, large firms are able to market their products effectively. Just elaborate more on it and how they're able to attain the economies of scale in that aspect.
Basically, I'll give an example of Trade Kings. So there are firms that are not even able to afford to market their commodities by giving free samples that people could even avail to have a chance to test their product. So economies of scale would be in a vast variety. All right. So the marketing strategies that could be employed are many. So what this simply implies is that firms were able to market their products very efficiently at a lower cost, because even in their samples, it's already budgeted for. They're able to give leaflets and free samples without going for a loss. Others, that very sample, you need to pay for it. Is that clear?
Thank you.
Then we also have what we call this economies of scale. These economies of scale are disadvantaged of growing beyond the optimal size, and they include the following: coordination problem, control problem, communication problem, the use of obsolete machineries, outdated machineries. So when we're discussing this concept, the economies, these economies of scale, we're actually in another term trying to refer to a situation where the cost per unit of output increases as the scale of production increases, also at a certain level. In other words, we're looking at a situation where firms will produce goods and services on a very large scale. And it can also experience these economies of scale and increases cost per unit as output increases. So this is arising from reduced efficiency and profitability. Ideally, as you produce more, you must reduce on your costs, but this one, they move in a positive direction. So these economies of scale will usually arise from a lot of factors, like managerial inefficiencies, communication problem, coordination difficulties, bureaucracies that a firm may have, worker alienation, where you are not using particular individuals because of personal issues. As a result, a firm becomes an experience of these economies of scale. These ones can really lead to firms experiencing higher costs than their competitors, which will give them comparative disadvantage instead of comparative advantage. So in some cases, firms will actually choose to decrease their production scale to avoid such, because there's no way we're increasing our production at the same time our costs are increasing at the same time. Right. So finally, my last slide, motives for growth. So motives for growth may be different for different organizations. So others may desire to achieve economies of scale. Others may desire to have monopolistic power just to obtain a greater market share. Others may desire to just achieve security of producing certain products. Others may desire to grow, to build linkages and consolidate access to certain markets back and forward, and also to secure sources of raw materials. So motives of scale differ depending on the objectives of the firm. I repeat, one may be to achieve economies of scale, others to dominate and monopolize the market and have a greater market share, others for profitability, others to break even. We call that satisficing behavior, just to meet your costs as long as you're living and you're able to, and others just to get through the linkages. So this is what I had for you. Unless any questions, we'll end here. Thank you so much for your time.